Hey everyone, it's Stephanie here, and today I have a card to share that features a different kind of take on the popular shaker cards right now. Rather than use a basic shape to put my shaker material in, I'm going to use a word die and have the shaker elements underneath of the word when the card's completed. So to start my card, I just went ahead and picked out a thanks die from the Many Thanks die-namics from My Favorite Things. And I'll also be using one of the smaller sentiments from the Words of Gratitude stamp set. And that's just going to be stamped underneath of the word when I die cut it out. I'm also going to use a stitch rectangle to cut the focal piece and then go ahead and cut the thanks die directly out of that. So the rectangle piece was just cut from smooth white cardstock, and then I just kind of measured with my T-square ruler to make sure that my word was on straight. And I went ahead and adhered that onto that stitch rectangle piece with a piece of painter's tape just to kind of hold it in place. And then I'm just going to carefully remove the die cut piece from that center area. Now we're not going to be using the actual thanks die cut word, but you can go ahead and set that aside and use it on another card. We're just going to be using the paneled piece here that we've cut out. And we're going to be putting the center areas back in the letter, so you just want to make sure you hang on to those. So now before we start to do any type of assembling or putting the card together, we want to go ahead and stamp the rest of the sentiment just because we want it still on a flat piece of cardstock. And I just wanted to use the for everything in the sentiment. So rather than kind of mask off pieces of the stamp to add the ink on, I just went ahead and cut it apart. And if I want to use it as it was intended later down the road, I can just go ahead and attach that back on my acrylic block and it will stamp together no problem. So to stamp this sentiment, I'm just using steel gray dye ink. This is one of my favorite dye inks for when I don't want to have the harshness of black, but I still want to have a pretty bold stamped image. I really love to use the steel gray. And now that I have that all together, I went ahead and cut a piece of vellum slightly smaller than the rectangle piece. And this is just going to get adhered directly on the back of this little piece here. So to ensure that the letters are completely stuck down onto the vellum, I'm just using a glue pen first and just going around all of the edges of the word and adding some adhesive. You just want to be careful that you don't put too much because when you push it down onto the vellum, you don't want the adhesive to kind of ooze out the sides. And then I'm also adding tape runner adhesive to the rest of the piece so that the vellum is fully adhered and we don't have any problems with any of it lifting off. So I'm just going to go ahead and push that down, being careful, like I said, with that liquid glue that I don't kind of squish it out the sides, and then I'll just kind of press down on the letter areas to make sure that they're fully adhered. And now that we have that vellum piece, we have a place to anchor the center areas of the letters, so I just went ahead with liquid adhesive and glued those down as well. So now this panel is all ready to go. So the next step in creating the shaker component is to add your foam adhesive. Now I normally do 2 layers deep when I use this type of foam adhesive, but I don't want the sequins to move a whole lot because I want them to stay behind the letter. So I'm only using 1 layer, and I'm going ahead and adhering all kinds of foam adhesive. I probably have more than I need here. But the trick to using a word die and keeping all the sequins contained behind the word is to make sure that you add the foam adhesive directly around the word. So you can see there that I have a kind of a rectangle area. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my powder tool to go along the insides of the adhesive. This just helps to remove some of the stickiness of that adhesive so that all the sequins don't stick against the edges. And then now it's going to be ready to go and I can go ahead and add any of my sequins into there. But before we get to that, we want to go ahead and finish the rest of the card base so that we can adhere this all together when we're finished. So I'm just using the Romantic Script background stamp from My Favorite Things, and I'm adding some tangy orange dye ink to that background stamp. And then I'm going to stamp that directly onto a tangy orange card base that I've already created. This is a landscape card and it's top folding, and I'm just going ahead and putting that directly onto that stamp there, and I'm just going to grab some scratch paper and kind of lay that on top so I don't get ink all over my fingers, and then just firmly press around on that whole card base just to ensure that I have a nice solid image when I take it off of the stamp there. And then once you're finished, you get this really great tone-on-tone contrast, which adds just a perfect amount of something to the card base, so it's not too simple, but it's not too overbearing and takes away from the main part. So now I have this little medicine cup of sequins. I have these medicine cups all over my craft area. If you have kids, you probably have a million of these things, and I love to use them for small little things like this to hold sequins or whatever. So I just went ahead and filled it with a bunch of fall type sequin colors, and filled that center area where the word is. Now I realized to be able to get the mat on straight, I would want to take the top piece directly down onto the mat piece, but all my sequins would fall out. So to kind of help that, I just placed them all in and then took a second piece of vellum and cut it the same size as the sequin area, and then went ahead and adhered that on top. So now when I go to flip this over and adhere it to the steel gray cardstock mat piece, all those sequins are going to stay where I've put them and not fall all over the place. So now I'm just going to go ahead and kind of figure out where the center area is and firmly press that down. And now I have this great little shaker part, and it's kind of raised off of the gray area, and this is going to be ready to be matted to the card base. So I'm just using straight adhesive to glue this directly onto the card base. I'm not adding any additional foam adhesive. I like the amount that's underneath the shaker component, and I didn't want to add additional from that. So I just went ahead and centered that, got it where I wanted it, and firmly pressed it down. And then to finish the card, I just am going to go ahead and add a bunch of sequins that are kind of from the same pile that I had put inside the shaker, just so they kind of match in color. And then I'm just adding some gold and silver stickles to the center areas of the sequins, as well as the areas on the outside of the sequins. So just a fun way to make a different type of shaker card where vellum is the covering area instead of acetate, and all of the shaker component is behind a word rather than a shape. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.